everybody, welcome to the channel. Hey guys, we're your hosts, M and J, and today the two of us are talking about issue number 2 of Captain Marvel 2019. We made a video covering the first issue, so you can go and watch that if you haven't already, but with that being said, let's get into the comic. Most of this issue was exposition, and not a lot really happened plot-wise. I don't think it was necessary to have so much of this issue be dedicated to exposition, because I think the audience was able to figure out what was going on pretty quickly. This is something we talked about in our review of Captain Marvel number 1, where we were worried that they would stretch this story out to however many issues and expect comic book readers to pay full price for each one, when this same story probably could have been told in half the time. Comic books have to compete with a lot of other mediums to entertain people, and if people don't feel like they're getting their money's worth, they're going to look elsewhere. Now would be a good time to have a strong Captain Marvel comic, considering the fact that they could capitalize on the movie that's coming out. But they probably didn't need some drawn-out post-apocalyptic story with pretty bad writing. The comic opens with an interview on the street style commentary, which is a way to recap what happened last issue. I feel like the people of New York aren't represented very well in this comic. There's this one lady who says that the Avengers not being able to get through the portal was amazing. I don't really know what she means by that. And then there's this other lady who says that she thinks she saw Thor's naughty parts. Why would you even tell the camera that? Also, how? He's fully clothed. What's wrong with this lady? We do finally get to see some people who are not fans of Captain Marvel, or just don't know what to make of her. In the first issue, Tony told Carol that her poll numbers were way down, but we didn't see any evidence of that. All last issue, we saw people praising her and welcoming her back and happy that she was around, so it made it kind of hard to believe Tony. We should have seen these people last issue, and then this would help to reinforce that by having them show up again. But on the other side of the portal, Carol is fighting Nuclear Man. Nuclear Man manages to get the upper hand on Carol, but then Spider-Woman, Echo, and Hazmat show up to back her up. Nuclear Man gets upset at this, claiming that they're cheating, and then he flies off in a huff. I really hope that they add more depth to Nuclear Man, because right now he's a very one-note character and is basically just a misogynist, and there's really nothing else to him. I understand that this is an existing character from the Marvel Universe, but it's also pretty clear that they wanted Carol to fight this guy just because he's an unapologetic misogynist. Out of all the Fantastic Four villains and all the villains in the Marvel Universe, they just had to give her this guy. He even specifically sought her out just because she's a woman. Never mind all the other female superheroes, some of which are here. They could have given any one of them this story. This just doesn't really feel like it had to be a Captain Marvel story, and I hope that they'll have more depth to the plot later. When writers and companies have these characters that are meant to represent diverse groups of people, it's probably best not to constantly call attention to it, like the fact that Carol is a woman, because it makes it sound like it is abnormal for women to be superheroes. And look at all the things she has to overcome because it's abnormal to have women be superheroes. The best way to have diverse heroes is to just let them be heroes. We don't have to constantly be reminded that they're diverse. The true point of a superhero is to help people, not to prove something. But this story was specifically given to Carol just to prove something, and it's kind of taking over the whole story. But back to the comic. It cuts to the guys, and She-Hulk is with them now. They're all looking at Roosevelt Island after they weren't able to go through the portal like Carol was. Despite the fact that everything looks okay from their side, communications are down and no one can get through to the island. And Thor says that they should keep trying. But Rhodes insists that she can handle herself, and the guys get called on another mission downtown, apparently involving vampires, while She-Hulk keeps staring out to the island, apparently not joining them. Is it bad that I would rather follow the guys to see what's up with these vampires instead of continuing on with this comic? Back on the island, the women take Carol to their base and explain the situation. Nuclear Man took over the island and put up a barrier that apparently only women can get through, which explains why the men were sent back when they tried. They also say that time is moving faster on the island than it is outside of the barrier. So while it's only been a few hours for Carol, it's been over a month for those on the island. Carol notices that there are only women at the base, and Echo tells her that they've been trying really hard to keep all the women from Nuclear Man, and that they don't know where the men are, but they think that they're being held in the Citadel, which is where Nuclear Man is held up. But they don't know if they're still alive or what's going on. Carol asks Jen how she's been holding up, and she says that her powers actually don't work on the island, which she wouldn't mind if she weren't stuck there, but she's keeping her hazmat suit on just in case they do kick in, so she won't accidentally hurt somebody. The writer decides to make a reference to Joseph's Technicolor dream coat, but referring to Nuclear Man's coat, which is the opposite of Technicolored. It's gray. Why did she think this was the right reference to make? It doesn't make any sense. References aren't jokes. They're just making a point by linking something back to something else that most people are familiar with, or at least that's the idea. So if you're gonna have a reference, it should actually make sense in context with the story. It's kind of a nitpick, but if you're gonna have references, you might as well think about these things. They take Carol into the war room where she meets Sam, the only man in their base. Apparently he escaped the Citadel in the early days. Sam is able to tell them about Nuclear Man's Citadel and where he thinks the other men are being held. He's also able to tell them about Nuclear Man's technology, and he thinks that might be responsible for Hazmat's powers not working, and also for affecting Echo and Spider-Woman's powers too. It's kind of strange that only some of their powers are being affected but not others. Like, Carol doesn't seem to be affected at all by this technology. It would be nice if they explained Nuclear Man's motivation in all of this. I'm sure it'll come up in a later issue, but what exactly is his goal here? Does he want to subjugate women and use them as a workforce? But if that were the case, then why has he kidnapped all the men and left all the women out here? Does he want to keep them as concubines? And he locked all the men away because he sees them as competition? Sam does allude to that. In the first issue, Nuclear Man showed up and said that he specifically came because he heard that Captain Marvel was back and he just wanted to see what all the fuss was about. It didn't really seem like there was more to it than that. I guess he had already started his conquest of Roosevelt Island, but it also feels like he's presented as too one-note for some big plan like this. He's so comical and goofy and such a misogynist that you can't really take the guy seriously, but then he does manage to cause this little mini post-apocalyptic world. It feels like it wasn't built up the way it needed to be. You know how people say that a hero is only as good as their villain? Well, I'm worried that this is one of those cases where they try to make the hero look cool by making their villain not cool. If you have a strong villain, then your story has to have at least an equally strong hero. If we have a story where you're supposed to take it seriously, but the villain is so ridiculous that you just can't take him seriously, then what's the audience supposed to do? We've been told that Carol can deal with planet killers, but now she's stuck in this situation with this joke of a villain. It just seems like such a downgrade for her. He kind of feels like a villain that shows up for a one-shot story, and not really a main villain that would have some overarching plot. If we're gonna have a story that spans however many issues, we really need to have a villain that's more fleshed out than this. What else is going on in his life? What are his motivations? Because right now, all we really know about him is that he's a misogynist and he has some tech. I'm honestly really hoping that there is more to this character and he's not just one note. Because I really feel like this storyline is just not going to be very memorable if that isn't the case. But anyway, Carol is suspicious of Sam because he's the only man there, but no one's been able to really question him because they're stretched pretty thin, and he's been very useful to their cause. Carol decides that they have to move on to the next step and not just play defensive anymore, instead taking the fight to Nuclear Man. She gets this kind of crazy idea to build a plane out of their spare parts they have in their weapons hangar. But before they can commit to anything, they're attacked by Nuclear Man's metal men. Jessica asks Carol to lead despite the fact that she just got there, but Carol agrees to it and flies off to face the Minutemen. Echo makes a comment comments about how Carol forgot her name once, but she likes her anyway, and we get some cringy dialogue from Jessica. It's nice that the characters are getting along in the story, but this feels like it could have been a team book instead of being a Captain Marvel book. Ultimately, Carol doesn't really stand out that much. Everybody keeps saying how exceptional she is, but she hasn't really done much to prove it. This feels more like a story that Carol Danvers is in rather than Carol is leading. Despite what Jessica said, she hasn't really grown on us, which is probably a good thing considering she described her as a fungus. Not so flattering, is it? The Minutemen attack the base, and everyone works hard to fight them off. They manage to grab Sam and also refer to him as a prince, implying that there's more to his character than we've been made aware of at this point, which I'm happy about because this story could really use more depth. Carol tries to help him, but she's grabbed by one of the Minutemen, who refers to her as a bride, implying that Nuclear Man has a crush on her, which she's not happy about. Carol is struggling with the Minutemen when She-Hulk comes bursting through the portal, and Carol starts celebrating at the sight of her. Except now we have two characters named Jennifer. Maybe they should have thought of that when they were making this roster of characters. Unfortunately, Jennifer gets depowered almost immediately after coming through the portal, apparently being affected by whatever power zapping tech that Nuclear Man is using. Hopefully they'll explain that more, because I don't understand why some characters like She-Hulk are totally depowered while others like Carol aren't affected at all. And then there are characters like Spider-Woman who's only mildly affected by it. Overall, we did like this issue better than last issue, just because there wasn't as much time for cringy dialogue, since they had to make all the room for exposition. But I don't think this was a very strong second issue. There was a lot of exposition crammed in here, but there's also questions that probably will be answered, but I think that it could have benefited from the writers thinking about what to reveal at the best time. In this issue, Carol gets dragged into the conflict after most of the heavy lifting has already been done, so we just get told about all of that. But maybe it would have been better to have her be a part of that so we could have seen building up this base and we could have met Sam along the way. I think it would have been more interesting and a better reading experience, and we could have had exposition reserved for things like Nuclear Man and what he's planning and what he's up to, instead of dedicating most of this issue to exposition and introducing us to all these characters, some of which we already know. I think if they really want to make this story work, they need to give more depth to Nuclear Man and even the heroes. It kind of seems like they expect you to already know these characters, and they don't do much to really introduce them or establish them other than Hazmat. But Echo's just kind of there. Spider-Woman is pretty much just there. She talks about how she misses her son and so on and so forth, but we don't really get a lot more from them. I guess there's a lot of characters, and so because a lot of time was left to exposition, we don't get a lot of time to really get to know these characters. For example, if somebody was interested in this book series because the Captain Marvel movie is coming out soon, but they don't have a lot of knowledge or experience with Carol or her lore, then they might be kind of lost trying to get to know these characters, like Spider-Woman, who doesn't really have a lot of presence outside of comic books, and the same goes for Echo. For the most part, these hero characters come off as traditional archetypes, Hazmat being the young teenage superhero with a lot of power but can't control it and also has problems with authority, Jessica being the supportive best friend who's also a caring mother, and we already complained about how one-note Nuclear Man is. But that's just our opinion. What do you guys think? Have you been reading this comic? What do you think of Carol? The movie is right around the corner, and we're not really planning on going to see it. Brie Larson's performance seems about as interesting as Carol is in these comics, but are you looking forward to the movie, or are you just waiting for Endgame like we are? Let us know in the comments down below. If you liked this video, you can leave a like and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching, everybody. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye, everyone. Bye, guys.